The arrival of the mystics. The night sky erupted in a dazzling display of colors as the first portal tore through the fabric of reality. Humanity watched in awe and terror as beings of pure energy descended from the swirling vortex, their forms shimmering with an otherworldly glow. These weren't the aliens of science fiction, sleek and technological. No, these were creatures of pure magic, defying the laws of physics with every movement. Dr. Elena Reeves, lead scientist at the Global Defense Initiative, stared at her monitors in disbelief. "This can't be happening," she muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to make sense of the readings. The energy signatures were off the charts, unlike anything ever recorded on Earth. As the mystics, as they came to be called, spread across the globe, humanity quickly realized the extent of their power. With a mere thought, they could manipulate matter, control the elements, and bend reality to their will. Cities fell in days, reduced to rubble by hurricanes conjured from clear skies or swallowed whole by the earth itself. Militaries around the world mobilized, but their weapons proved ineffective against beings that could simply phase through solid matter or redirect missiles with a flick of their wrist. It seemed that humanity was outmatched in every conceivable way. Commander Jack Harper of the United Earth Defense Force stood before the United Nations Security Council, his face grim. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing an enemy unlike any we've encountered before. Our conventional weapons are useless, our defense is meaningless, but we have one advantage they don't: the human spirit." As he spoke, reports flooded in from around the globe. The mystics were not just conquering, they were harvesting. Human beings were being rounded up, their life force drained to fuel the invaders' magical abilities. It became clear that this wasn't just an invasion, it was an extinction event. Dr. Reeves worked tirelessly in her lab, trying to understand the nature of the mystics' power. "There has to be a scientific explanation," she insisted to her team. "Magic is just science we don't understand yet. If we can understand it, we can fight it." Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. As the mystics drained more and more humans, they began to show signs of weakness. Their once invulnerable forms flickered, their powers waned. Elena realized the truth: the mystics weren't gods. They were parasites, dependent on the very life force they were destroying. Meanwhile, pockets of resistance began to form around the world. In the ruins of New York, a group of survivors led by former police officer Sarah Chen discovered that the mystics couldn't maintain their powers indefinitely. There were moments of vulnerability, split-second opportunities to strike. Sarah's group managed to take down a mystic using nothing more than well-timed attacks and improvised weapons. The news spread like wildfire through underground channels. Humanity might be outgunned, but they weren't beaten yet. In the mountains of Switzerland, a team of scientists and engineers worked on a daring plan. If the mystic's power came from another dimension, perhaps it could be disrupted. They began construction on a massive device designed to interfere with the very fabric of reality. As the first month of the invasion drew to a close, humanity stood on the brink. Billions had perished, great cities lay in ruins, and the mystics seemed unstoppable. But in hidden bunkers, secret labs, and guerrilla camps around the world, the seeds of resistance were taking root. Commander Harper addressed his remaining forces, a motley crew of soldiers, scientists, and civilians. "We may not have magic," he said, his voice firm with resolve, "but we have something just as powerful. We have innovation, we have determination, and most importantly, we have each other." The mystics think they've won, but they've never faced anything like humanity before. And we're just getting started. As night fell on a world forever changed, the survivors of humanity prepared for the fight of their lives. They had no spells, no mystical powers, just the unbreakable human spirit and the will to survive. In the face of impossible odds, they would show the universe why humanity should never be underestimated. The stage was set for a battle that would determine the fate not just of Earth, but of reality itself. And despite everything, Hope burned bright in the hearts of those who refused to surrender. The war for Earth had only just begun. Earth's desperate defense. The dawn broke over a changed world. Smoke from burning cities mingled with the ethereal mist that seemed to follow the mystics wherever they went. In what remained of London, Sarah Chen and her ragtag group of survivors huddled in the underground tunnels of the old tube system, planning their next move. "We've proven they can be hurt," Sarah said, her voice echoing in the dimly lit chamber. "But taking down one or two isn't going to win this war. We need a bigger plan." Next to her, Dr. James Whitmore, a former Oxford professor of theoretical physics, nodded grimly. "I've been analyzing the data from our encounters. There's a pattern to their energy signatures. If we could disrupt it on a large scale." Their discussion was interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing down the tunnel. Everyone tensed, weapons at the ready, but relaxed when they saw it was just Marcus, their scout, returning from a recon mission. "You're not going to believe this," Marcus panted, out of breath. "I saw them, harvesting." The group listened in horror as Marcus described what he'd witnessed. The mystics had rounded up a group of humans in Trafalgar Square. With a gesture, they'd drawn glowing strands of energy from their captives, absorbing it into themselves. The humans left behind were shells, barely alive. "It's not just about conquest," Dr. Whitmore mused. "They need us. Our life force, our essence, whatever you want to call it. That's what powers their magic." Sarah's eyes hardened. "Then we hit them where it hurts. We deny them their fuel source." Across the Atlantic, in the hollowed-out NORAD command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain, Commander Jack Harper received Sarah's transmission with grim satisfaction. "Good work, Chen. Keep gathering intel. We're working on something big here." He turned to Dr. Elena Reeves, who was hunched over a complex array of equipment. "Tell me you've got good news, Doc." Elena looked up, her eyes bright with excitement, despite the dark circles beneath them. "I think we've cracked it, Jack. The mystic's power. It's not magic, not really. It's energy manipulation on a quantum level. They're tapping into the fundamental forces of the universe." "Can we stop it?" Jack asked, cutting to the chase. "Maybe," Elena replied. "We're developing a device that could create a localized field to disrupt their abilities. But we need more power, and we need to test it." Jack nodded. "Whatever you need, you've got it. This might be our only shot." As humanity's brightest minds worked feverishly on a technological solution, others took a different approach. In the Amazon rainforest, a coalition of indigenous shamans and Western scientists combined ancient wisdom with modern knowledge, seeking a way to combat the invaders on a spiritual level. A young shaman spoke to the assembled group. "The mystics are beings of pure energy, disconnected from the natural world. We must find a way to ground them, to bind them to the laws of our reality." Dr. Sophia Patel, a quantum physicist, nodded in agreement. "It aligns with our theories. If we can force them to fully materialize in our dimension, they might become vulnerable to conventional weapons." The Unlikely Alliance began work on a ritual that combined complex equations with ancient chants, aiming to create a field that would force the mystics into a fully physical form. Meanwhile, in orbit, the crew of the International Space Station watched helplessly as the world below was torn apart. But they weren't idle. Commander Yuki Tanaka had repurposed the station's sensors to study the mystics' energy patterns from above. "There's a rhythm to it," she reported to ground control. "Like a pulse. And it's getting stronger." The implications were clear. The mystics were building toward something big, and time was running out for humanity. Back on the ground, guerrilla warfare tactics began to show results. Sarah Chen's group in London successfully ambushed a mystic patrol, using the sewers and underground tunnels to their advantage. In New York, a former stage magician named David Blaine used his knowledge of misdirection and illusion to confuse and trap mystics, proving that sometimes the old tricks were the best. But for every victory, there were crushing defeats. Tokyo fell in a single night, its millions of inhabitants drained of life to fuel a massive ritual that turned Mount Fuji into a swirling vortex of magical energy. The Australian outback became a nightmarish landscape of twisted reality where the laws of physics no longer applied. In his command center, Jack Harper received report after report of losses and setbacks, but he refused to give up hope. "We've faced extinction before," he told his staff. "Ice ages, plagues, world wars. Every time, humanity has come back stronger. This is no different. We adapt, we overcome." Elena's voice came over the intercom. "Commander, we're ready for a test." Jack hurried to the lab, where Elena and her team had set up their device. It was a hodgepodge of technology, particle accelerator parts jury-rigged to quantum computers, all connected to what looked like a satellite dish. "It's not pretty," Elena admitted, "but it should work. In theory, it will create a field that nullifies the mystic's ability to manipulate energy." "In theory," Jack repeated. "Well, no time like the present. Fire it up." Elena activated the device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, alarms began to blare throughout the base. "Mystic signatures detected." A technician shouted. "They're heading straight for us." Jack grabbed a rifle. "Looks like we got their attention. Everyone, battle stations. Elena, keep that device running no matter what." The mountain shook as the mystics attacked. Rock melted, gravity reversed, and reality itself seemed to warp. But in a small radius around Elena's device, everything remained normal. "It's working." Elena shouted over the chaos. "The field is holding." Outside the field, soldiers fought desperately against impossible odds. Men and women who had once manned missile silos and radar stations now found themselves on the front lines of a war against beings that defied comprehension. But they weren't fighting alone. As news of the device spread, resistance groups around the world launched coordinated attacks, drawing the mystics' attention and resources away from Cheyenne Mountain. In London, Sarah Chen led her group in a daring raid on a mystic stronghold. In the Amazon, Aya and Dr. Patel completed their ritual, creating a localized zone where mystics were forced into physical form. And in orbit, Commander Tanaka used the ISS's thrusters to position the station for a daring plan. As the battle raged, Jack fought his way to Elena's lab. "We need to boost the signal," he shouted. "Can we use the old no-raid satellite network?" Elena's eyes widened. "Yes, if we can uplink to the satellites, we could create a global field. But we'd need someone to manually activate each satellite, and the mystics control low Earth orbit." Jack's radio crackled to life. "This is Commander Tanaka. We heard everything. The ISS can do it. We can reach the satellites." "It's a one-way trip," Jack warned. "The mystics will throw everything they have at you." There was a moment of silence before Tanaka responded. "We know, but if it gives Earth a fighting chance, it's worth it." As the ISS began its dangerous mission, the battle on the ground reached a fever pitch. The mystics, sensing the threat, launched an all-out assault on Cheyenne Mountain. Reality buckled under the strain of their power. In the heart of the mountain, Elena worked frantically to boost her device's signal. Jack and the remaining defenders fought with everything they had, knowing that if they fell, humanity fell with them. Just when all seemed lost, Commander Tanaka's voice came through, weak and staticky. "Uplink. Successful. Activating. Now." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, like a wave spreading across the globe, the mystic's power flickered and died. From the ruins of cities, the depths of forests, and hidden bunkers, humanity emerged, battered but unbroken. The mystics, their invulnerability stripped away, found themselves facing a species that had spent its entire existence learning to survive against impossible odds. With their connection to their home dimensions severed, the invaders were forced to retreat, fleeing back through their portals. As the last mystic vanished, a cheer went up from every corner of the globe. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged victorious. But the cost had been astronomical, and the world would never be the same. In the smoking ruins of Cheyenne Mountain, Jack helped Elena to her feet. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "We actually did it." Elena nodded, tears in her eyes. "But this is just the beginning. We have a world to rebuild." As the sun rose on a scared but free Earth, humanity began the long process of recovery. They had lost much, but they had gained something too. The knowledge that when united, there was no force in the universe that could stand against the indomitable human spirit. The war was over, but humanity's greatest challenge was just beginning. The stars awaited, and this time, they would be ready. The human resistance rises. In the months following humanity's desperate victory against the mystics, the world began the slow process of rebuilding. The scars left by the invasion ran deep, both on the Earth's surface and in the hearts of its people. But with each passing day, the indomitable human spirit shone brighter. Commander Jack Harper stood atop the partially rebuilt Cheyenne Mountain complex, surveying the bustling activity below. Construction crews worked tirelessly to fortify the base, while scientists and engineers scurried between buildings, carrying equipment and engaged in animated discussions. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Dr. Elena Reeves said, joining him at the railing. "A year ago, we were fighting for our very existence. Now, look at us." Jack nodded, a hint of a smile on his weathered face. "We've come a long way, but we can't afford to let our guard down. The mystics may be gone, but they left plenty behind." Elena's expression grew serious. "You're right. The anomalies are spreading faster than we can contain them. And there's something else." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We've detected energy signatures similar to the mystics. Weaker, but growing stronger." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You think some of them stayed behind?" "Or worse," Elena replied. "We might have our own homegrown problem." Before Jack could respond, an alarm blared across the complex. They'd rushed to the command center, where a young technician was frantically typing at her console. "Report," Jack barked as he entered. The technician looked up, her face pale. "Sir, we're picking up a massive energy spike in what used to be Chicago. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Jack turned to Elena. "Get your team ready. We're going to Chicago." As they prepared for the mission, reports flooded in from around the globe. The anomaly in Chicago wasn't an isolated incident. Similar energy spikes were occurring in the ruins of major cities worldwide: London, Tokyo, Moscow, Sydney. In the Amazon rainforest, Aya and Dr. Sophia Patel felt the disturbance in the very air around them. The delicate balance they had worked so hard to maintain was shifting. "It's happening again," Aya whispered, her eyes distant. "The veil between worlds is thinning." Dr. Patel nodded grimly. "We need to warn the others. Whatever's coming, it's bigger than anything we faced before." As the sun set on a world teetering on the brink of another catastrophe, humanity's defenders mobilized. In London, Sarah Chen and her team geared up, their hard-won experience from the mystic invasion evident in their efficient preparations. This time, Sarah told her squad, "We're not starting from scratch. We know what we're up against, and we're ready for them." Across the Atlantic, Jack Harper's transport helicopter approached the ruins of Chicago. The once great city was now a maze of twisted metal and crumbling concrete, with strange, shimmering distortions in the air that bent light in impossible ways. "My God," Elena breathed as they flew over the devastation. "It's like reality itself is breaking down." Jack's jaw tightened. "Set us down there," he ordered the pilot, pointing to a relatively clear area near the epicenter of the energy spike. As the team disembarked, their instruments went haywire. Compasses spun wildly, and their advanced sensors emitted a constant stream of contradictory data. "It's like the laws of physics are in flux," Elena muttered, fiddling with her equipment. "Whatever's causing this, it's fundamental. It's changing the very fabric of our reality." They made their way through the ruins, the air growing thicker and harder to breathe with each step. Strange, ethereal whispers echoed around them, just on the edge of comprehension. Suddenly, a piercing scream cut through the air. The team rushed forward, weapons at the ready, only to stop short at the sight before them. In a clearing surrounded by the twisted remains of skyscrapers, a group of people stood in a circle. But they weren't ordinary humans. Their bodies flickered and shifted, sometimes appearing solid, sometimes translucent. And at the center of the circle, a swirling vortex of energy pulsed and grew. "Are they mystics?" one of the soldiers whispered. Elena shook her head, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "No, they're human. Or they were. They're changing." As they watched, one of the figures turned to face them. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and when he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere at once. "You cannot stop the ascension," he intoned. "Humanity will transcend its physical limitations. We will become like the mystics, and then we will surpass them." Jack raised his weapon. "Stand down and step away from the portal," he commanded. The transformed human smiled, a terrifying sight that seemed to stretch beyond the confines of his face. "You still cling to your primitive ways, Commander Harper, but soon you'll understand. The invasion was just the beginning. It showed us what we could become." With a gesture, the figure sent a wave of energy pulsing outward. Jack and his team were thrown back, their weapons torn from their hands by an invisible force. As they struggled to their feet, Elena's voice cut through the chaos. "Jack, the portal. It's expanding." The vortex at the center of the circle had indeed grown, its swirling energies now engulfing the transformed humans. As it touched them, their bodies seemed to dissolve, becoming one with the pulsing light. "We have to shut it down," Jack shouted, fighting against the pull of the vortex. Elena frantically worked at her portable device, the same one that had helped turn the tide against the mystics. "I'm trying to generate a containment field, but the energy levels are off the charts." As the situation grew more desperate, a new sound cut through the maelstrom, the beating of helicopter blades. Sarah Chen's voice crackled over their comms. "Cavalry's here, Commander. What's the situation?" Jack quickly filled her in as her team repelled from the hovering choppers. "We need to close that portal before it consumes the entire city." Sarah nodded grimly. "We've got something that might help. During our cleanup operations in London, we found artifacts left behind by the mystics. Dr. Whitmore thinks he's figured out how to use them." As Sarah's team joined the fray, Dr. James Whitmore approached the edge of the vortex, carrying what looked like a staff made of shimmering, otherworldly metal. "It's a focal point," he shouted over the roar of the portal. "The mystics use these to channel and direct their energy. If we can use it to redirect the portal's energy back on itself." Elena's eyes lit up with understanding. A feedback loop. It could cause the portal to collapse. Working together, Elena and Dr. Whitmore positioned the staff at the edge of the vortex. As they activated it, the staff began to glow, pulsing in rhythm with the swirling energies. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the portal began to shrink. The transformed humans screamed, their bodies stretched and distorted as they were pulled back into the collapsing vortex. "It's working," Elena shouted. "But the energy buildup, if it all releases at once." Jack understood immediately. "Everyone, fall back. Take cover." The teams retreated to the relative safety of the surrounding ruins, just as the portal collapsed in on itself with a thunderous implosion. A shockwave of energy radiated outward, shattering windows for miles around and leaving a ringing silence in its wake. As the dust settled, Jack and his team cautiously approached the site of the portal. Where the vortex had been, there was now only a perfectly smooth, circular depression in the ground. The concrete and metal around it warped and twisted into impossible shapes. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her voice hushed. Elena shook her head, her expression grim. "I don't think so." This was just one site. There are others all over the world. And who knows how many people have already been changed. Jack's radio crackled to life. It was Aya, calling from the Amazon. Commander Harper, we've sealed the disturbance here, but at a cost. The forest, it's change. There are areas where time and space don't seem to follow the rules anymore. Similar reports began to flood in from around the globe. The portals had been closed, but they had left scars on the fabric of reality itself. And more troublingly, there were reports of people exhibiting strange abilities, their bodies and minds altered by exposure to the otherworldly energies. As the sun rose on a world once again irrevocably changed, Jack Harper addressed his assembled teams. "What we've faced here today is just the beginning," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "The mystics may be gone, but they've left behind a legacy that threatens the very nature of our reality. Some of our own people are changing, becoming something other." He paused, looking each of them in the eye. "But we've faced the impossible before, and we've prevailed. We are humanity. We adapt, we overcome, and we never, ever give up. The road ahead will be hard, but I know that together we can face whatever comes next." As the teams dispersed, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead, Alina approached Jack. "What you said about adapting," she began hesitantly. "Do you think, could this be the next step in human evolution?" Jack's expression was unreadable as he gazed out at the altered skyline of Chicago. "I don't know, Alina, but whatever's coming, we'll face it the way we always have, together as humans. Changed or unchanged, we're all in this fight." As they turned to leave, a flicker of movement caught Jack's eye. For just a moment, he thought he saw a figure watching them from the shadows, its form shifting and changing like smoke on the wind. But when he looked again, it was gone. The battle for Earth was over, but the war for humanity's future had only just begun. Operation Shattered Veil. The world had changed. In the wake of the mystic invasion and the subsequent ascension events, Earth had become a patchwork of altered realities. Major cities around the globe now stood as testaments to the lingering effects of otherworldly energies, their skylines warped by gravity-defying structures and streets bisected by shimmering veils of distorted spacetime. Commander Jack Harper stood before a holographic display in the war room of the newly christened Anomaly Response and Containment Organization, RCO. The map before him was a kaleidoscope of colors, each hue representing a different type of reality distortion. "The situation is deteriorating faster than we can respond," he said to the assembled leaders. "The number of individuals manifesting abilities is growing exponentially, and we're detecting new rifts opening every day." Dr. Alina Reeves stepped forward, her face haggard from countless sleepless nights. "Our latest research indicates that the mystics' invasion fundamentally altered the underlying fabric of our reality. The barriers between dimensions are weakening, and our world is leaking." Sarah Chen, now head of RCO's field operations, frowned. "Leaking? Into what?" "Into everything," Alina replied. "Other dimensions, parallel universes, realms we can't even begin to comprehend. And things from those places are starting to leak back into ours." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was Aya, joining via holographic projection from her base in the Amazon, who broke the silence. "We've seen this in the forest," she said, her voice tinged with both wonder and concern. "Plants and animals unlike anything that has ever existed on Earth. Some beautiful, some terrifying." Dr. James Whitmore cleared his throat. "There's more. We've been studying the artifacts left behind by the mystics, and we believe we've discovered their true purpose. They weren't just weapons or tools. They were keys." "Keys to what?" Jack asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. "To our reality," Whitmore replied. "The mystics weren't invaders in the traditional sense. They were more like cosmic locksmiths, here to open our dimension to something much, much bigger." The implications were staggering. Humanity had repelled the mystics, but in doing so, they might have inadvertently set in motion something far worse. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Jack's expression hardened with resolve. "We fight. We adapt. We do what humanity has always done in the face of the impossible. We find a way." Over the next few weeks, RCO mobilized on a global scale. Teams were dispatched to major anomaly zones, equipped with a combination of advanced technology and repurposed mystic artifacts. Their mission was twofold: contain the spread of reality distortions and investigate the possibility of using these rifts to humanity's advantage. In New York, Sarah Chen led a team into the heart of Manhattan, where the laws of physics seemed to be mere suggestions, skyscrapers twisted into impossible shapes, their upper floors existing in multiple states simultaneously. In Central Park, trees bore fruit that changed shape and color with each passing moment. "Stay alert," Sarah warned her team as they navigated the surreal landscape. "Reality is fluid here. Trust your instincts, not your eyes." As they approached the epicenter of the distortion, they encountered their first major obstacle: a group of changed humans, or ascended, as they called themselves, had set up a perimeter around a pulsing rift in space-time. "This is a sacred site," their leader announced, his voice echoing strangely. "The gateway to our evolution. You are not welcome here." Sarah stepped forward, her hand raised in a gesture of peace. "We're not here to fight. We're trying to understand what's happening and find a way to stabilize these anomalies before they tear our world apart." The ascended leader's eyes narrowed. "Stabilize? You mean suppress. You fear what you don't understand. We have seen beyond the veil, and we will not allow you to close the door to our destiny." Negotiations quickly broke down, and the situation devolved into a chaotic battle. The ascended wielded powers that defied comprehension, bending light, manipulating gravity, even seeming to rewind time itself. But Sarah's team had trained for this. Using a combination of advanced tech and adapted mystic artifacts, they fought back, their movements precise and coordinated. As the battle raged, Dr. Elena Reeves worked feverishly at a portable console, attempting to analyze the rift. "There's a pattern to the energy fluctuations," she muttered. "If we can match it, disrupt it." Suddenly, the rift pulsed, expanding violently. Sarah watched in horror as one of her team members was caught in the event horizon, his body stretching and distorting before vanishing entirely. "Elena," Sarah shouted over the comm. "We need to shut this thing down now." "I've almost got it," Elena replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "Just a few more seconds." The rift flared again, and this time, something began to emerge. It was vast, its form constantly shifting, defying description. Tendrils of otherworldly energy reached out, grasping at the air, the ground, the very fabric of reality. "Elena!" Sarah screamed. "Now!" Elena shouted back. Sarah activated the device they had brought, a modified version of the one that had repelled the mystics. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like the universe itself gasping, the rift began to contract. The entity emerging from it writhed, its tendrils flailing wildly as it was pulled back into whatever realm it had come from. The ascended cried out in anguish, some of them throwing themselves into the collapsing rift in a desperate attempt to follow the entity. Others fled, their powers flickering and fading as the anomaly closed. As the dust settled, Sarah surveyed the aftermath. The park was in ruins, reality still shimmering and uncertain in places, but the immediate threat had been contained. "Status report," Jack's voice came over the comm. "Rift closed," Sarah replied, her voice weary. "We lost Daniels, a few others injured, but we stopped whatever was coming through." "Good work," Jack said, "but it's not over. We're getting reports of similar events all over the globe. Whatever's on the other side of these rifts, it's trying to break through." As Sarah's team regrouped and tended to their wounded, similar scenes played out around the world. In Tokyo, A team led by Commander Yuki Tanaka battled creatures of living shadow that poured from a tear in reality above the city. In Moscow, Dr. Whitmore used repurposed mystic technology to seal a rift that was causing time to flow backwards, threatening to erase the city from existence. Back at RCO headquarters, Jack and Elena pored over the data streaming in from the field teams. "There's a pattern here," Elena said, her eyes scanning the holographic displays. "These rifts, they're not random. They're forming a network, almost like neurons in a brain." Jack's expression darkened. "You think there's an intelligence behind this, something coordinating these incursions?" Before Elena could respond, an alarm blared through the complex. "Incoming transmission," a technician announced. "Sir, it's coming from the moon." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a face Jack had hoped never to see again. It was the leader of the Ascended they had encountered in Chicago, but he had changed even further. His form was now more energy than matter, his eyes glowing with otherworldly power. "Commander Harper," the being said, its voice resonating strangely. "I hope I have your attention now." Jack's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" "To offer you a choice," the Ascended replied. "What you've seen so far is merely a prelude. The barriers between realities are collapsing, and no force in this universe can stop it. Join us. Ascend. Become part of something greater than you can imagine. Or stay as you are and be swept away by the tide of change." "And if we refuse?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. The Ascended smile was terrifying in its serenity. "Then we will do what must be done to ensure the evolution of our species. The age of ordinary humanity is over, Commander. The only question is whether you will embrace the future or be consumed by it." As the transmission cut out, Jack turned to Elena, his expression grim but determined. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us." Elena nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to understand this network of rifts, find its weak points. If we can disrupt it, we might have a chance," Jack finished. He turned to address the room at large. "All right, people. This is what we've been preparing for. Humanity stands on the brink, not just of extinction, but of transformation. Our job is to make sure that transformation happens on our terms, not theirs." As the ARCO teams mobilized for what might be their final stand, Jack couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived. They had repelled the mystics against impossible odds. Now they faced a threat from within, a cancer of twisted evolution threatening to rewrite the very nature of what it meant to be human. But as he looked around at the determined faces of his team, scientists, soldiers, and everything in between, Jack knew that the human spirit was far from broken. They would find a way. They always did. "All right," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Let's save the world." Again, as RCO prepared for its most ambitious operation yet, codenamed Shattered Veil, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and this time, the enemy was not just out there in the stars, but within the very essence of what it meant to be human. A new dawn for two worlds. The moon hung low and ominous in the night sky, its familiar face now marred by glowing fissures of otherworldly energy. From ARCO's command center, Commander Jack Harper watched as the final preparations for Operation Shattered Veil were put into motion. "All teams report ready, sir," Sarah Chen's voice came through the comm system. "We're as prepared as we'll ever be." Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Good. Remind everyone. This is it. Everything we've learned, everything we fought for, comes down to the next few hours." Dr. Elena Reeves approached, her tablet displaying a complex array of equations and energy readings. "The network of rifts is stabilizing," she reported. "If we're going to act, it has to be now." Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "All right. Initiate Phase 1. Across the globe, ARCO teams moved into position. In the twisted ruins of major cities, in remote wilderness areas warped by reality distortions, and at strategic points identified by Elena's calculations, soldiers and scientists worked in perfect synchronization. Sarah Chen led the team in New York, navigating the surreal landscape of a Manhattan forever changed by the cosmic incursions. Skyscrapers folded in on themselves like origami, streets spiraled into impossible geometries, and the very air shimmered with potential energy. Device planted, Sarah reported, securing a modified mystic artifact at the base of what had once been the Empire State Building. Activating now. Similar reports came in from around the world. In the Amazon, Aiga and Dr. Sophia Patel worked to harmonize their device with the pulsing energies of the altered rainforest. In Tokyo, Commander Yuki Tanaka's team fought off waves of shadow creatures as they struggled to position their artifact. As each device activated, a web of energy began to form, visible even to the naked eye, a lattice of shimmering lines connecting the points of distortion around the globe. Back at RCO HQ, Elena watched the readings with growing excitement. "It's working," she breathed. "The network is forming exactly as we predicted." Jack allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Initiate Phase 2. At his command, a second wave of teams moved in. These groups, led by Dr. James Whitmore, carried equipment of a different sort, technology reverse-engineered from mystic artifacts, designed not to close the rifts, but to stabilize and control them. "We're not trying to shut the door," Whitmore had explained during the planning stages. "We're trying to install a lock that we control." As Whitmore's teams got to work, resistance from the Ascended intensified. In London, Sarah's counterpart found his team surrounded by beings of pure energy, their forms flickering between states of matter. "We will not allow you to stem the tide of evolution," their leader intoned, voice echoing with otherworldly resonance. "We're not trying to stop evolution," the RCO team leader replied, remembering his briefing. "We're trying to guide it, to find a middle ground." But the Ascended were beyond reasoning. The battle that ensued was like nothing seen before on Earth. Advanced human technology clashing with reality-warping powers in a struggle for the future of the species. Similar scenes played out around the globe. In Moscow, RCO forces found themselves fighting alongside unlikely allies, a group of Ascended who had rejected the path of total transformation, seeking instead to find balance between their new abilities and their humanity. "We were wrong," their leader told the ARCO team as they fought side by side. "Power without purpose, evolution without wisdom, it's a dead end." As the battle raged on Earth, Jack received an urgent communication from the Lunar Observation Post. "Sir," the officer reported, voice tense, "we're detecting massive energy buildups on the far side of the moon. Something's coming through." Jack's blood ran cold. He turned to Elena. "How much longer?" She shook her head, frustration evident. "We need at least another hour to fully stabilize the network. Whatever's coming, we're not ready for it." Jack made a decision. "Patch me through to all teams," he ordered. As the channel opened, he spoke, his voice carrying to every RCO operative around the world. "This is Commander Harper. We've run out of time. Whatever's on the other side of these rifts is making its move. I need every one of you to push harder, work faster. The fate of our world, of humanity itself, rests in your hands. We've come too far to fail now." His words galvanized the teams. In New York, Sarah Chen rallied her forces for one final push. In the Amazon, Aiga tapped into powers she had only begun to understand, merging shamanic wisdom with cosmic energies to accelerate their work. But it wasn't enough. As the last pieces of the global network fell into place, the far side of the moon erupted in a dazzling display of otherworldly energies. Through tears in the very fabric of space-time, vast shapes began to emerge, beings of such cosmic scale that the human mind struggled to comprehend them. "My God," Elena whispered, staring at the feed from the lunar cameras. "They're like cosmic predators, and our reality is their hunting ground. Jack's jaw set in grim determination. Then it's time we showed them that this reality bites back. Initiate final phase. Around the world, our TO teams activated their devices in perfect synchronization. The web of energy that had formed between the stabilized rifts pulsed once, twice, and then flared with blinding intensity. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire world held its breath. Then, with a sound that defied description, part thunderclap, part cosmic sigh, the network activated. The effect was immediate and awe-inspiring. The vast entities emerging from the lunar rifts recoiled as if struck. The tiers in reality began to knit themselves together, not closing entirely, but stabilizing into controlled gateways. "It's working," Helena exclaimed, her eyes darting between redouts. "We're not just closing the rifts, we're reshaping them, creating a controlled interface between our reality and theirs." On screens around the world, humans watched in wonder as the sky itself seemed to change. The moon, once marred by glowing fissures, now shimmered with a subtle, otherworldly beauty. And beyond it, visible to the naked eye for the first time, were glimpses of other worlds, other realities. No longer a threat, but a tantalizing promise of exploration and discovery. As the cosmic storm subsided, Jack received reports from around the globe. The Ascended, those who had pushed for uncontrolled evolution, found their powers diminished but not gone, regulated by the same network that had saved Earth from invasion. In New York, Sarah Chen stood atop a building that defied Euclidean geometry, watching as the city slowly began to stabilize. "We did it," she breathed into her calm. "It's over." But Jack knew better. "No," he replied, his voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "It's just beginning." In the days that followed, as the dust settled and the true scope of what had been accomplished became clear, humanity found itself standing on the threshold of a new era. The rifts, once a threat, had become gateways to new frontiers. The Ascended, their powers now tempered and controlled, offered insights into realms of science and philosophy previously unimagined. 1 month after Operation Shattered Veil, Commander Jack Harper stood before the United Nations General Assembly, tasked with explaining to the world what had happened and what it meant for the future. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "we stand at a crossroads unlike any in human history. We have faced extinction and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The barriers between realities, between what we once thought of as science and magic, have been irrevocably altered." He paused, looking out over the assembled leaders of the world. "But make no mistake, this is not an ending. It is a beginning. We have been given an opportunity, not just to explore new worlds, but to redefine what it means to be human. The path ahead will not be easy. There will be challenges we cannot yet imagine, dangers we are only beginning to understand. But I stand here today with unshakable faith in our species, in our ability to adapt, to grow, to face whatever the universe, or the multiverse, might throw at us." As Jack spoke, similar scenes played out across the globe. In the Amazon, Aya and Dr. Patel led a team of scientists and shamans in exploring the new boundaries of reality, merging ancient wisdom with cosmic understanding. In Tokyo, Commander Tanaka oversaw the construction of the first interdimensional embassy, a structure that existed simultaneously in multiple realities. And in laboratories and universities around the world, a new generation of humans, some changed, some not, but all irrevocably altered by their experiences, began the work of understanding and harnessing the new forces at their disposal. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril. But as Jack looked out at the faces before him, he saw not fear, but determination. Not confusion, but curiosity. The human spirit, tested by fire and cosmic forces beyond comprehension, had not been found wanting. "We are no longer alone in the universe," Jack concluded his speech. "But more importantly, we are no longer limited by it. The stars themselves are now within our reach, and beyond them, realities we have only begun to imagine. We have been given a gift, a chance to write the next chapter not just of human history, but of cosmic history. Let us go forward with courage, with wisdom, and with the unshakable unity that has seen us through our darkest hours. As applause filled the chamber, Jack allowed himself a small smile. They had saved the world, yes, but more than that, they had opened the door to a future brighter and more fantastic than anyone could have dreamed. The age of ordinary humanity was over. The age of cosmic humanity had begun. And whatever challenges lay ahead, Jack knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would face them together, as they always had. The universe, in all its infinite variety, awaited, and humanity, resilient, adaptable, and now truly unbound, was ready to meet it head-on.